welcome everyone to the Sean Trey Show. I am glad to be back, and I have an awesome guest with me. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and kind of what you do?
Well, Sean, thank you for having me. My name is Olana Osborn. I am recently a full-time freelance equine videographer. I specialize in rodeo videography, but I shoot all breeds and disciplines of horses across the country for nationwide brands.
That's awesome. It's really cool that I'm going to tell you how I found your work. There was a couple things that I was looking at. I'm fascinated by rodeos. I am absolutely fascinated by a couple things. One, the other day I was walking down the stairs and I slipped and I bumped my elbow. And I was like, oh man, that hurts. And I'm just, feeling old, stretching out. And then the other day I was, looking at Instagram and a bull rider popped up. And I was just watching this person ride a bull. And I was like, okay, that's kind of like strapping myself to the top of a Honda Civic, and going for a ride.
Worse than that.
And the Honda Civic's angry and it wants to hurt me, worse than that. Exactly. Absolutely fascinating. And so I started looking into it, and I was looking up, photography, and rodeos. And then some of your images came up, and then it started me down another path. And I was thinking, I'm a photographer and videographer. I have a hard time, filming my daughter and maintaining focus. She's 7. I can only imagine. How do you approach this whole profession of things that are happening? 7 seconds is what an average ride is, right? You have that much time to capture.
8 seconds.
8 seconds. How do you do that?
Oh, well, I think it's because of my career over time has always, even starting from being a news reporter, I was a breaking news reporter. So I didn't have the luxury of, we didn't have people giving us stories. I didn't have a cameraman. It was just me, one-man band. I've been that way most of my career until thankfully my boyfriend is now my co-shooter for a lot of rodeos. But it's always been very fast-paced. So I think that mental space has prepared me through my career. I've been a very hard worker. I was an only child. And so I started working with my parents as soon as I could walk. They were self-employed. So I think a lot of things have contributed to me being able to work in a high pressure environment for my job, where if you miss it, it's done. And that has happened to me, where sometimes I think I'm recording and then I go to stop the recording and then it actually starts and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I've missed things, or, when you're by yourself, yeah, it's the worst feeling in the world. You're like, yeah. And then you click it and you hear the beep, like you just start recording. However, I will tell you my secret and what works for me, because at first I would get really nervous and it would make me shaky, and then it would make my footage bad. So what I have had to create is this little pre-shoot routine. And I do this for a lot of events, unless I'm on camera, because I do on camera work as well. But I have my favorite food, a concession stand cheeseburger, and one beer. And then
Awesome.
that's just my perfect mix. I'm not shaky because I'm hungry. I'm calm. But I'm a little, I guess, like loosened up. I'm not as nervous to say, hey, can I hop in there and get a shot of you? Because I am outgoing, but sometimes, rodeo cowboys aren't really the most media trained people in the world. And so you have to help loosen them up with your energy. And so that's my pre-shoot routine for, I would say, about 90% of my shoots. And, the nighttime, 90% of my nighttime shoots, I'm not cracking a cold one at 8:30 in the morning, but it does kind of help me just calm down. I'm not shaky and just kind of enjoy the ride.
I remember one time I saw this interview of Matthew McConaughey, and he was talking about his his pre-movie ritual before he would go onto a scene. And they actually put it into The Wolf of Wall Street, where he's sitting there and he's pounding his chest and he's getting himself ready for that. And it was fascinating because I talked to different people that have different careers, and there's a lot of people that have a routine or a ritual, whatever it might be, and it might just be about the certain food they eat or the certain thing they do. And it's always fascinated me as well because it works. It works. It gets you into the space where
It works.
where you feel comfortable. Now, how did you find this career? How did you step into this? Because you had said that you were a reporter before. What led you to pursue photography at rodeos instead? And there's your dog. That's awesome. Mine will probably be scratching on the door in a second.
I have a young coonhound who lets us know whenever she wants to be somewhere that she's not. So we'll just have to ignore her. But how did I get into this? It's been I'm only 25, but I've had a lot of jobs and kind of lived a lot of life. I
That's
was
awesome.
raised in the carnival. My parents owned rides, games, and concessions. And amongst other things, my father was in show business for a long time. My parents have both been self-employed. So when I said I started working as soon as I could walk, it's true. My first job was filling up cups of lemonade and setting them on the uh, counter in the cotton candy trailer that we had working at fairs. So I did that until I was 18. A lot of work, a lot of early mornings and late nights, which really unbelievably set me up for this career very well, especially being self-employed, because if you don't work, you don't eat. And
Yeah.
that's how it was my whole life. That's how it is in the rodeo world. And that's why I love rodeo so much, is because it's a very similar lifestyle, but in my opinion, the people are better. Um, it's just a completely different culture. So I went from being a carny, I guess, to when I was 6 years old, my mom sat me down and said, "You're going to go to college." My parents got divorced when I was 6. She worked very hard as a single mother to be able to put some money away so that I could go to school. And she said, "Your job through the school years to get straight A's." And so I'd work in the carnival during the summers. My job in school was to get straight A's so I could go to college. And I actually was working on political campaigns in high school. I was interning in politics. And so I studied journalism because I was told to study journalism, not political science, because it'll make you better in front of the camera, better to talk to people, although public speaking has always come naturally to me. So I started in journalism because I wanted to go into politics. And now I'm very glad that I didn't, and that God just opened the right doors for me to get to where I am. But I became a news reporter when I graduated because I realized that my calling was to be a storyteller. I like sharing the 90% that's underneath the tip of the iceberg. Everybody can see those 8 seconds in the arena, but what did it take for you to get there? What did you have to sacrifice to get there? So then, as a news reporter, I realized that there's really only so much you can share in a minute and 45 seconds. It's a difficult industry to work in. There's not a whole lot of longevity in that industry. So typically, after your first station, a lot of people find another career, and then you have the select few that really love it and they stay in it for the long haul. But for me, I was pretty burnt out after 8 months at my first station. I had been working in news for 2 years at that point already, and I didn't really want to do it anymore, but I didn't have an opportunity to leave. And so I went on a news story and got connected with some people with the Chamber of Commerce here in Ocala. And the Chamber of Commerce here is not like your grandma's chamber. The people, they're young, they're forward thinking, they do new and fun things. And so the CEO reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you." And I thought that he was going to tell me about a news story. So I called him on the phone and he offered me a job. For a second, it didn't register that he was offering me a job. And what he wanted me to do was make a business development focused online TV show. And so I left my job at the news station, moved to the Chamber of Commerce world, and started this first of its kind online feature show with different businesses in Ocala that were doing different things. I started this online feature show about different businesses in what we call the Ocala Metro, kind of the greater North Central Florida area, with business leaders that were making big investments, doing different things. And then it just so happened that TV 20, the station I worked for, picked it up. And so then it was a TV show for the station that I used to work for. Um, because Ocala is the horse capital of the world, I would do some equine features. I would freelance. I picked up some equine clients. I was raised in proximity of horses, but because of our lifestyle growing up, we couldn't have them. We had reptiles, not dogs, because they were easier to take care of, and you could still have a little pet, in the aquarium. So we couldn't have dogs, let alone a horse. But I always loved them. I rode when I was a kid uh, at a farm in New York, and we ended up getting picked up on TV. And so now we have a TV show again. And that TV show focused on something different every week that was unique to Ocala. And then I ended up doing work for a member, which we used to call partners at the Chamber of Commerce, that was a manufacturer for fly spray in the equine world. Oddly enough, I ended up working for a fly spray manufacturer, and a lot of people ask, like, what's that transition like? Are you just so passionate about insecticide? That was the question I got all the time. No, it was a unique opportunity. I was the first communications director in 50 years at this company. They were in need of a lot of help on their media side of, social media, best practice, internal, external communication. And so I left the Chamber of Commerce to become the national communications director for a fly spray manufacturer. And so about 3 months in, I went to my first rodeo in a very long time, and I brought a camera. And I was going there because I had pitched this idea. The 50th anniversary of the company was coming up, and they were trying to think of ways other than magazines and print to celebrate their 50th anniversary. And I said, how about I make a documentary for you? Having no idea what goes into making a documentary as a team of one. I had worked on a documentary in college, but I was just a production assistant, and there were 5 people on that team. So they said, sure. And I said, well, you'll only have to pay for my travel. So my first shoot was actually at a rodeo. And about halfway through, it was a smaller private rodeo. So they let me behind the bucking chutes. They let me go wherever I wanted to. And I'm standing in this bucking chute, shooting a bull. And I just got this feeling like, I freaking love this. I want to do this every day. It's like I got bit by the rodeo bug. And it is addicting. It's a unique environment. It's a high energy environment. You can feel it. And so I created this film. It took me 14 months to make this film, but all the while I was shooting rodeos on weekends. I shot 40 rodeos for free just because it was new to me and I wanted to put in my reps. And I knew that, I was a media professional and had been for 6 years at that point, but I was new to that world. So I would just call, I'd look up places on Google and I'd say, hey, will you let me bring a camera to your rodeo? And that scares a lot of people because there's a lot of activists and protesters that will come up and shoot rodeos in a negative light. And so I'd always say, hey, I'm not doing an investigative interview on you. I just want to make some content for my Instagram, and you can have whatever I shoot. And so I shot 40 rodeos for free. And actually, I had never posted any of my work to social media before. And so I said, let me challenge myself and post a video a day for 30 days, a reel a day, because reels were still pretty new at that point. And so I posted my 30 reels in 30 days, and then I got into the habit of doing it. And after about 90 days, I had a reel get some traction, and it got about 80,000 views, and I was just over the moon. And that kept me wanting to go back and keep doing more and more and more. And then all of a sudden, Wrangler, through some contacts, I wanted an apparel sponsorship from Wrangler. And little did I know that the guy I was talking to started the Wrangler network. And so then some girl that nobody knew a year ago shot the 2022 NFR, which is the National Finals Rodeo. And the National Finals Rodeo is the Super Bowl of rodeo. It's very hard to get in. It's very hard to shoot. But nobody knew who I was. And then all of a sudden, it seemed to the outside world like all of a sudden. But to me, it was a lot of work, a lot of free work, a lot of reps being put in behind the scenes. That was kind of the evolution from news reporter to rodeo videographer. It was a lot of overlapping. Let me freelance for this. Oh, I like this. I like shooting horses. And then I actually got booked for a job to shoot an equine event. And then one thing led to another. I don't advertise anyway. I guess my social media is advertisement, but I just ended up networking, and I didn't even know if I was good. I didn't know if I was good at my job. I didn't know if I was a talented videographer. So I said, let me just challenge myself to be better. And if people like it, great. And if they don't like it, then I'll keep trying to improve. And I love it, so I'm going to keep doing it. And so that is, in a nutshell, it was a lot of late nights, early mornings, and just, I don't know, happenstance in some ways, God opening doors, God letting people notice me. And now here I am, full-time freelancing in the equine industry.
That's awesome. It's really awesome too, because I've had a lot of career. Everyone thinks this career is going to be a straight line, and I've found that it's never straight. It's circular. It flows, and and some of the best connections that you can have come about from that simple choice to give something a shot, and to go out and make something and to do something, and you don't know what's going to come from that, but you go into it and you just try. How are you working with your camera, or how do you get your position? What are you thinking about before, like the seconds before things get going? How do you approach that?
The biggest thing that goes through my head when I'm prepping, it's not just the rodeo. It's the rodeo that's made up of 6, 7, 8 different events, because you have the rodeo clown doing one thing. You have a lot of rodeos now have almost like a halftime show. They bring in a specialty act. You have the specialty act doing another thing. And then you have the bulls that every time the bull comes out, just about where they're going to be. You have the broncs when they come out, you're going to have to follow them in a straight line. And then you have team roping, barrel racing, breakaway roping, tie down roping, all of which have different patterns. So it's less about how do I capture this from a 30,000 foot view, but how do I make sure that I track each individual event in a way that follows the horse, that nobody's out of focus, that everybody's always in my frame, and that I shoot it with the right settings, with the right angle, so that when I edit it, I remember how I shot that. I know I wanted to do blank. And so it's a bunch of very small pieces put together that you can either create a really great 10-second reel, or you can make a really great 60-second recap video. But the important elements are those smaller pieces along the way.
There's two things that you touched on today that I really enjoy, and I just want to poke at and kind of bring light to. First of all, for your videos, and then also for what you talked about with some of the people that were involved in rodeo, that we see the tip of the iceberg, and we don't realize all that has gone into everything. um, there was someone who was talking to me about this business founder. I can't remember his name, but this guy's absolutely huge and established, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that guy's been a rich person forever." But if you go back through their story, they were a nobody at one point in time, and then not just that, they were somebody, but somebody who did work. You know what I mean? And they just put in these steps, and that we so often don't see all that goes into what we do. My team, we've been really working at stepping up our reels game. With the new quick short form media, it's something that you have to refine. I've been used to long form content, and it's a whole different ball game. And we've been getting better every week. And then we just had this one video that went viral, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's amazing!" And you guys, I've been. Everyone assumed that we were it was new, that's something that we had done, and we're like, no, we've been doing it, but it takes time, and it
Right.
takes,
Right.
and I think that that's a really interesting thing that with your photography that you're saying there is this path that you've been kind of going down, and people just don't see it. They don't see all of the work. People enjoy that 10-second clip, they enjoy that 30-second or 60-second sizzle reel, but there's so much more that goes into it. And I was fascinated by.
Yeah, my mom always.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, my mom always says it takes 20 years to become an overnight success,
Right.
because the same thing has happened to her with her business. And all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, you're so busy. How'd you do it?" She's like, "Well, we'd have to start like 20, 30 years ago, actually, if you want to know how I've become successful in my career." So, um, no, and that was my film that I created was I'm pointing, that's the poster to it behind me. Um, I That's what I said to everybody was, we have videos of your highlights. I don't want to know what your highlights were like. I want to know the nights that you cried because you didn't think you were going to make it and that you never thought you were going to be good enough. I want to know what that was like and how that motivated you to become better. We can talk about the good stuff, but I want to know everything else. And that's what's most intriguing to me. And I think that's what everybody loves, is the behind the scenes. And that's what I've started to specialize in a little more, is how to ask people those questions and make them comfortable when I just shake their hand and set up a camera and start asking them these really vulnerable questions. But those are the stories that people want to hear.
There's this with media, one of the things that I enjoy about the newer media, the quick stuff, the fast stuff, is that with whether it be Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, we used to get media curated to us, and it would be scrubbed, and they would find some type of thing that was what mass media wanted to share. But now we have the ability to tell these stories, and I think that people want to see truth. They want to see vulnerability. They want to see, because I see all of these really wealthy, successful people on TV, and today, I'm not gonna lie, I struggled today. I had a tough day, and so many people have that same experience. When we see someone, going through something, that makes us feel not alone, And if I see
Right.
what this person's going through, that's doing any number of these activities in rodeo, whether it be um, one of the timed activities that you were talking about, or whether it be one of so what are the two categories again? That's fascinating of itself. You have timed
Yes, you
activities.
have timed events, and those are the ones where people are riding their own horse. And
Okay.
then you have rough stock events where they are riding the bulls and the broncs
Okay.
that are bred to buck, and they're bred to bred to buck bigger. They're trained. A big area that I'm passionate about is educating people on animal welfare in rodeo. These bulls and broncs, especially, that's the area, because the cowboys wear spurs and when they're riding them, and people think that they're being abused or that there's nails in the straps that they put around their flank. It's wool, it's sheepskin with baby powder on it. They're bred to do this. They like their job. Those animals are treated better than most people's children. They
Yeah.
are. They are fed better. They are loved so much. They are taken care of. These cowboys, once they have, it works with a draw. So you pick a number, you're assigned a number. That number is the stock that you're riding that night. They'll go and meet them and pet them, and a lot of guys will pray for them. And because God forbid, you don't want anybody to get hurt. That's part of the sport when you sign up to ride in 1,100 pounds of meanness, but they don't want anybody to get hurt.
Right.
And so they are treated very well. They're worth just as much as a racehorse in the Kentucky Derby, a lot of them. So that's an area that we can talk about more if you want, but there's the rough stock, and those bloodlines are traced like a family lineage. And then you have the timed events where people train and bring their own horses along the rodeo circuit.
That's awesome. It's just an awesome world, and it's in something that too that, again, it's a tip of the iceberg where people will see something. I grew up, I was born in New England to a British father and an American mother, and we lived all over the States. But then I remember when I was a kid, we moved to Idaho, and I was about 10 years old, and one day we got to go see the Snake River Stampede. And it was this, big rodeo up in Idaho, and it was absolutely amazing to see this whole new world for me. And it was absolutely fascinating because, like what you're saying, there is this whole subculture that exists that people might not be aware of, and this is the thing that I love about this, because in our whole world, we view other people as different. We view divisions, but at the end of the day, we're all really interesting people that have really beautiful ways of life that I love as well. Like, if someone offered me like Aladdin's lamp, and I had an Aladdin's lamp, and I could pick any job that I wanted, what I would do is I would absolutely love to do like a micro dirty jobs, except going out and learning all about people's lives and seeing just what are people doing, and learn and to try what they do. I mean, I don't know if I could do rough stock, but I sure as heck would love to go out there and just meet the animals and see the cowboys and learn about these people's way of life. I think it's fascinating, and it's fascinating to be able to tell those stories, because you create bridges between people, and that's powerful for me. And I think that's what you're doing, and at least what you're describing is awesome.
Yeah, that's my hope, is that people can maybe come in with whatever thoughts they may have about the rodeo world, if they're new to it or they've been around it and they just didn't like it, or if they had some preconceived notion, and see some of my videos. I have a highlight on my Instagram stories called Rodeo Facts, and I refer people to that when they come and they say, "You support animal abuse." I want them to go through that, and there's a few pages that I refer to in that highlight, because they focus a lot more on education than I can, because they're raising the rough stock, they're raising the animals. So you can look through their page. And then unless somebody just really has decided they want to argue on social media that day, most of the time they read it and they say, "I'm sorry, I thought that way." And so that is my goal. I want to share more of these stories, and a lot of my clients have plans to have me go out and, for a bull riding team, like, "Hey, we want you to go and talk to this guy and just talk about his background. Just like give us the nutshell of his life story." And that's the kind of work that you can do when you can connect to somebody's emotion. You can give them facts all day, but when you watch somebody, especially a rodeo cowboy, get really emotional about his way of life, it's not an easy way of life. No. Whether you are a rancher, we know that that ranchers and farmers, sure, we know that's not an easy way of life, but the life of people who live rodeo, they're in a different city every day, having to take care of the horses that they brought along, hauling them. You know, it's a lot on the animal when you haul them for 3, 4 months straight. It's not easy. So you have to go the extra mile in a lot of ways that you normally wouldn't when you just have a horse in a pasture. There's a lot of extra care. Or you have the rough stock riders who band together in groups of 3 or 4 and they drive literally all over the western side of the United States. They're away from their wives, from their children. And when they have a good score and they have that big payday, that makes up for the however many years or months of trying to get there with no money. And it's still difficult for them. No job is easy. My job, you know, everybody's life looks great on Instagram, but
Yeah.
everybody's job has difficulty to it. And so I hope that in the future, one of my goals is to be able to share a lot more of those one-on-one stories in rodeo specifically. And a great feature film that was made about it is Fearless on Netflix. I think you would enjoy it. It's about the
I will
bull
look it
riders
up.
and the PBR. Yeah, and it is, I mean, I'm in this world and it gave me a different perspective. It's very well done. And it shows, you know, there are guys who miss their kid being born because they made the world finals. And if they win, they could win $1 million and that would change their life. Or they could win a couple 100,000. That's still pretty good. So there's a lot of sacrifices that people in this world make. And it's like I have one foot in, one foot out because I'm not doing it the way that they are, but I still document it all. And so my hope is that I can share this on a deeper level to my audience and those who are intrigued by this way of life.
That's awesome. Really powerful. We don't see behind what uh, we take so much for granted. Everyone does, you know, for certain in life with the way things work and the way the world works. We had, like I said, I live in Southeast Asia and things are done differently. And one day we had some people come to clean the sewer line because again I said there's like there's a lot of trash, people, a lot of plastic that goes into the
Hmm.
waste, and that's just a really bad thing. So the sewer line can get plugged up, and so you know, from a Western perspective, you're like, oh, they're gonna get a machine that can kind of dredge the thing out. And so my father-in-law was like, hey, can you go downstairs and kind of watch and just because the one of the access points to it is through the front like courtyard in our house. So I went downstairs and I was watching this process. And they took the top off, and a guy came out in a jumpsuit, took off his shoes, and lowered himself up to here. And, and I just am like sitting there going, oh dear, oh dear, oh, this is not happening right now. And I thought about like, you know, yesterday I had a challenge at work with a client that was difficult. And I was really down on myself thinking I had a horrible day. And I'm looking at a man that is
But you
up to
weren't
his
that guy.
chin. Yeah, up to his chin in poop. Like, there's no getting around that. And he's using his hands to dig out plastic bags. And he's just like, and he's getting scoops and not complaining, not, he just was doing it. That was his life. This is his job. And he did it. And in that moment, I thought, we have our heads filled daily with stories of influencers who are doing this and that. I said, why is there no one doing a story about this man? Like, how amazing it would be to tell the story of a person who who wakes up every day and goes, I will now take a dive into poop so people can have clear sewage lines. You know, And it sounds so crazy, like, to talk about that, but like, what? And I think that's what Mike Rowe's Dirty Jobs was all about. It was all about, you
Yes.
know, honoring those stories and honoring those people, that our world functions because of people who do these interesting jobs. And I think it's just such a cool thing to be able to pull back the curtain on whatever it is we see. I had a friend in. I've had a lot of jobs too. I'm older than you, but I've also had tons of iterations of my career. And I at one point in time was doing my master's in acupuncture and Chinese medicine before I dropped out of school because I was moving back to Asia and I wanted to see more. And one of my friends in graduate school was a former NFL player. And I asked, why did you get into this medicine? And he says, because I've got lots of friends that have finished football and now have tons of pain and they just get stuck on meds.
Mm.
And he says, I want to learn this. He's like, this is good with pain. You learn massage, you learn, herbal medicine, and you learn how to work with pain with acupuncture and such. And he's like, I want to be able to help people. And his whole thing, when I would talk to him, is he says, you don't see every Sunday Americans will crowd around their TV and enjoy the NFL. He's like, you do not see the sacrifice those guys make. You do not see what their bodies have to go through. And if they're lucky, they have a long career and they can set aside some money. And he says, but not everyone is lucky. And we consider it lucky, it's considered lucky to have a long career, but at the same time, you're just getting destroyed, for, 12-year career in the
Right.
NFL, man, that's 12 years of, intense, demand on your body. And so again, I come back to the beauty of telling these stories and to work, of what you're doing. But you touched on one other thing, that there are challenges. What are some of the obstacles and challenges that you face, whether that be directly related to taking photos or just in general in your career? And how do you deal with the obstacles that you approach?
So I would say the greatest obstacle is the governing body over rodeos. So there are independent rodeos, that's just like somebody wants to put one together. Rodeo. Well, there's a number of professional rodeo associations, and the largest one is the PRCA, the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association. And the PRCA and a lot of the Western world, I'm not speaking about them specifically. I would say my greatest challenge is that um, this industry is so close to embracing, like they're right on the cusp of embracing the power of social media in a positive way, because I don't think uh, many people in the Western world, one, want to spend more time on their phones. I think it's one of the few demographics that's all trying to spend less time on their phones because they have animals to take care of, or they've experienced it in a negative way. And
Yeah.
so a lot of rodeos in general shy away from anybody other than PRCA carded, it's called like your media card, they're called
Mm.
carded photographers. Becoming a carded photographer is a process. You have to have a letter of recommendation from a prior PRCA photographer of the year. You have to have a letter of recommendation from a PRCA photographer that's been in good standings for 10 or more years. So not only do you have to know them, you have to know them well enough for them to write you a letter of recommendation, but you also, that just puts you on a permit. Then you have to shoot X amount of number of rodeos during the day, at night, indoors, outdoors, and then you reapply for your full card. Now, I could do that tomorrow. The problem is they don't recognize videographers as media professionals. So I'm not a still photographer.
Sure.
I could probably take enough still photos because I know Lightroom, I know Photoshop well enough, but I'm in demand as a videographer, so it wouldn't make sense for me to stop all of my video projects to take pictures for a year just to get a photo card to be able to then have access to rodeos and take video. And I'm thankful for the PRCA because they put on some great rodeos. They've done good things for rodeo as a sport. That is the biggest challenge because if I call a rodeo, not even to try and get hired, but just to show up, a lot of them say, well, you have to have your PRCA card. But a PRCA card doesn't exist for videographers. It does not exist. And so they don't know where the line is for who they can and can't hire that's in media. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to accidentally hire somebody and then, oops, we accidentally hired PETA to show up to our rodeo because
Okay.
that happens. Protesters show up. And so they have to, their default answer is no, and I can't blame them. They don't know. They have a rodeo to put on that needs to be successful, and they have a photographer, and that's good enough for them. So in order to get in, I have to have a pre-existing relationship, or now, because I am one of the Wrangler Network's lead videographers, I can gain credentials through them, whether or not they're hiring me to go there. But I haven't done that yet because I live in the Southeast and a lot of the major rodeos this time of year are out West. So unless I'm getting booked to go, in which case Wrangler would credential me to get there, that's definitely the greatest challenge. And it's something that I would say that there's maybe a dozen really good rodeo videographers, and we're all in the same boat. Some of them have better contacts than others and have access to bigger rodeos because they grew up with these people or they did a job for somebody and they got referred. It's all word of mouth. Your reputation precedes you in this industry. And so I take professionalism very seriously. I want to do nothing but highlight this sport in the best light possible. However, there are a lot of ways where my hands are tied. So, and that's coming from somebody who shot the NFR last year and will be shooting it again this year and hopefully every year for Wrangler in the future. So the greatest challenge right now is trying to navigate how can I get hired and actually start getting paid for something that I would say I'm amongst some of the top best rodeo videographers in the world, and most of us aren't getting paid to shoot rodeos. We shoot rodeos because we love it and we want content for our social media, and then I supplement my rodeos with my other jobs. I take a weekend off so my boyfriend and I can shoot a rodeo together, and then the other weeks or weekends of the year I actually get paying jobs. So it's a labor of love, and it's a head scratcher for a lot of people who when they learn I shoot most rodeos for free because I'm just begging to be there.
Yeah.
There's a few rodeos through the year that, maybe 4, 5, 6 rodeos that I get paid to shoot. A lot of them are private or they're through Wrangler, or there's one here in Ocala that I have a good relationship that is a sanctioned rodeo that we get paid to shoot. But every other challenge in comparison to that one is so small because I've worked so hard to shoot rodeo, to learn the sport, to really get in there, and then to not be able to be, to not even be recognized as a media professional is difficult in the first place, but then also to not have the ability to actually get booked is a great challenge. So there's a movement, but it sounds like I'm saying this in a negative way, but challenges are really nothing more than an opportunity. And so it's new, it's very new in the grand scheme of things to our world, but it's very new to the Western world. And so there's a slight tide shift that's happening, and I'm hoping that a few of us videographers in the industry can try and prompt that, catalyze that conversation of, hey, can we just apply? Can we just apply for media credentials? Same way that still photographers have to do. All I want is to be able to fill out an application. And so my hope is that we will be able to have that conversation and just get the ball rolling.
That's awesome. Well, it's awesome that you guys have the. It's awesome that you have the outlook, because it's like a challenge can be something that stops you, or it can be something that creates change. And it can be the
Right.
catalyst that kicks off something that is a larger transformative thing. And I mean,
Right.
and I think there's quite a few professions where people are still not embracing some of the changes that are happening around us. I'm not gonna lie, I I I've had a hard time shifting from horizontal to vertical on some shoots that I'm doing. It kills me. It kills me.
Yep.
You know.
It's hard. It's hard to shoot. It's hard to shoot vertical, especially high speed events. When I shoot for a promo video, it's like, oh, I could do this in my sleep. I have so much room in my frame. But when it's vertical, you have so much less room, and you're still trying to capture the same amount of footage. That has been very difficult for me as well.
And so, and I think that is a prime example of where it takes time to kind of have this shift, and you have to sit there and evaluate things while you're in it. Like, wow, how much do I want to, chase this new trend? And is it something that is worthwhile? But I think that it's also at the same time, you can carve out a space for different arts. You know what I mean? Because I love shooting video, but I love shooting film. I still love, and it's just kind of a nostalgia that I have with my dad, because my dad taught me to shoot film. And when I was a kid, he would help me develop it with him. And I don't develop it now. That's just way too much work. But it's still something that I get a kick out of, and enjoy. Well, let me ask you this one last question. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Slow down, you're doing fine. I have always, and I think I'm in that place now where, I think it's just because I've been now 8 years having been spent as a creator, even though I'm not sure if I don't think being a news reporter is a creator, but still as a video production professional, always wanting to be bigger and to be
Mm.
recognized and to be hired for this next job and more, 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 more. But when it's crazy because when I actually stopped, I didn't have the time to think about my next big break when I was making my film. I spent 15 hours a day by myself in my home office, slumped in front of a computer screen, editing this film. And I didn't have time to think about anything other than my deadline. And
Yeah.
that really was a transformative period of time for me because that delayed gratification. I think now when you post a reel, it goes viral and you want that feeling again every time. And then you set yourself up for disappointment because your next reel gets like 300 views. How are
Right.
we supposed to understand an algorithm with 50,000 data points? We just can't. And so now that I've made a film, during that time it refined so many skills. So I was talking about that because I would not be half the videographer or media professional that I am now had it not been for being a news reporter, even though that wasn't very fun. Making my TV show, making my film, all of which were very, very hard points in my career. They fine tune you. So you have
Yeah.
to be okay with where you are and know that what you're doing now, you might not realize it and it really might not feel like it, but your next job wouldn't be possible without this hard time that's just wearing your brain out. And just, to keep going, keep doing what you're good at and just do what you're good at because if you're trying to jump ahead to the next big thing, you only have one chance to suck really bad. And so if you keep being good and keep getting a little better every time, you'll make that next big job when it's ready to come to you instead of,
Yeah.
I want that next viral video. I want that next viral video. Well, even this morning, I was looking, when was my last video that had over 1 million views? And I was like, oh, it was in February. Well, a year ago, I would have freaked out if I had one video over 1 million views, let alone six or seven. So I still have to remind myself, slow down, you're doing fine. I've only been self-employed since February 1st. And so that's been a mental challenge more so than anything. Um, but then when I look at it from February to mid-May, I'm doing good. It's okay. There's a learning curve to everything, and you're not going to get to where you want to be after 1 year. You're not going to get to where you want to be after 2 years, but it takes 20 years to become an overnight success. And so I mentor a number of creators as well. And I tell them the same thing. They're like, oh, I want 100,000 followers on Instagram and I want to be as fast as you at editing. I'm like, I was not this fast at editing when I was, I don't know, 6 months ago, 2 years ago. You are going to be so much farther along when you're my age. A lot of them are like, 18, 20, 21 years old. Or even if they're older than me, you're going to be so much better within your first year than I was within my first 5 because I want to help you. And you have tools available to you that I didn't have when I started. So being not just grateful, you can tell somebody to be grateful, but having in the back of your mind that this is important, this time where I'm really frustrated and really discouraged, you're just sowing seeds. It's going to pay off for you in the long run. And I'm telling that to my younger self. I'm telling that to my current self. And I'm telling that to anybody listening to this podcast in the future.